This is Megan, Pradeep, and Alexis, and we are going to be giving a brief introduction to SQL using SQLite. The goals of this presentation are to find and work with a basic SQL dataset and to introduce some basic SQL functionality to new users. We hope to cover the basic SQL functions, manipulating and editing the table, and creating new databases and tables. This video assumes that the user already has a basic understanding of what SQL does and why we need to use it. We also assume that the user already has SQLite installed on their machine. The dataset that we will be using comes from the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. It can be accessed by clicking on the link here. When you click on the link, this is the website it takes you to. It's a consumer complaint database, and to access the CSV file, you scroll all the way down to download the data and click Download All Complaint Data as a CSV. This dataset contains a CSV file of complaints that consumers have submitted to the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. The Consumer Finance Protection Bureau then sends those complaints on to the companies, and the companies are able to mitigate all of the concerns. Once we downloaded the data, we imported it into our IDE. The IDE that we're going to be using for this video is SQLite Studio, and it works with SQLite, but it's a little bit easier to visualize the information and to program the SQL functions. So this is what our data looks like once it's imported into the IDE. We have the date received, product, subproduct, issue, sub-issue, narrative of the complaint, public response, company that received the complaint, the state that it was located in, the zip code. We also have some information about the person who submitted the complaint, if they were classified as an older American or not. We also have some information about the consent that they provided to share the information with the company that they complained about. We have the way that their complaint was submitted and the date that it was sent from the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau to the company. We also have the response that the company had and whether or not it was timely. We also have that whether or not the customer disputed the company's response, and we have the complaint ID number, which we are using as our primary key for this table. And for this video, we chose to use just a subset of the table. We'll be using the first 20 entries of the CSV file because it's really large and it'll take a long time to load if we were to use the whole thing. The first thing we're going to talk about is comments in SQL. To do a comment in SQL, you need to use 2 dash marks at the beginning of the line, and you can't really do block comments. If you wanted to do a block of comments, you would need to have the 2 dash marks for each line. So let's look at our code. You can see that these 2 lines are comments because they're kind of grayed out compared to the rest of the commands in our program. So let's take a quick look at the data table that we have. We have a subset of the consumer complaints data. We have 18 lines of data from that table that we originally downloaded as a CSV. And you can see there's all kinds of different fields, different things that we can look at. If we wanted to select all of the fields in SQL in our editor, let's go back to that. We would use select star from consumer complaints, and that will select all of the information from the table. So here's that one, and here is the same table that we just looked at, but we selected it. If we only wanted to select a couple of fields from the table, we can specify which fields we want in the select statement. So we can say select ID, date received, and company from the table, and that will just give us those 3 fields. So here they are, just ID, date received, and company. If we only wanted to view a list of the products and not all of the products for all of the complaints, we use the select distinct function. So we would say select distinct product from consumer complaints. Let's take a look at that. And now we just have a list of all of the products that received complaints in our table. Another way we can use a select statement is with an alias. So, for example, ID is kind of an ambiguous term. We don't know if that's the consumer ID or the complaint ID or the product ID. In this case, from the information we have on our table, we know that ID is the complaint ID. So if we wanted to select ID, but we wanted to be a little bit more specific and specify that it is the complaint ID, we can say select ID as complaint ID from consumer complaints. So now we have a list of all of the IDs in the table, and the column name is a little bit more clear. We can also use a where statement to add conditions onto the select statement. So, for example, if we only wanted to view consumers from California, we use the same command that we've been using, select ID, date received, company, state, zip, and submitted via from consumer complaints where the state is California. So here is the information for consumers from California only. If we wanted to be a little bit more specific, we can do multiple conditions using and, or, and not. So, for example, if we wanted to view consumers from California who also submitted their complaint via a referral, we just add that as an additional condition. So here we have select the field from the table where the state is California and submitted via is referral. So now we have the information on consumers from California who submitted their complaints via referral. We can also use or to specify multiple conditions. So we say if we wanted to view consumers from California or Minnesota, we specify that in the where statement. And now we have information for the consumers from California and Minnesota. So if we look back at our table, we can see that it is sorted by date received in ascending order. If we wanted to view our table instead in alphabetical order by company, we're going to use the order by command. So we're going to use the same select statement, select the fields from the table, and then we're going to say order by company ascending. And ascending is the default. If we wanted to do descending, we would just change that to descending. So now we have our companies listed in alphabetical order. And like I said, if we wanted to do our companies in reverse alphabetical order, we just specify descending here instead of ascending. And now we have them in reverse alphabetical order. The next thing we want to do to our table is we want to add an additional row into the table. We want to add a new complaint basically. So we want to add there the ID, the complaint ID, the date that we sent it in, the company, the state, the zip code, and how it was submitted. So this is just kind of our little example. So these values don't completely make sense, but we're going to use the ID 12345 on January 1st, 2001. The consumer submitted a complaint for the best company. They're from California. 92115 is their zip code, and we are not quite sure how they submitted their complaint, so we're going to add that in as null. Null values are just kind of like placeholders for a field that we don't have an entry for. So here's our command, and it didn't print anything because it was just manipulating the table. But if we use a select statement to print out all of our information, we can see that up here at the top we have a complaint for the best company where their submitted via field is null. If we wanted to work a little bit with the samples that do have null values for a field, we can do that also. We can select complaints where the submitted via field is null. So we just have our entry that we created that's null. And also if we wanted to look at samples where the submitted via field is not null, we can also do that using a where statement and just specifying that we want all of the samples where submitted via is not null. And all of the other entries in our table do have the submitted via field completed, so as we can expect, they are all in this table because they do not have null values for the submitted via.